Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last. Mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers.
A lot of times you hear different terminologies being bandied about. One of them being restorative justice. That is what is going to form the basis of this conversation this time around. Welcome to Making It Last podcast. I'm your host, Noreen Daly, and the topic this time around is how can the techniques of restorative justice ensure we have healthy relationships? Now, you know I'm not the expert in that area, so of course I had to find somebody. She's a restorative justice facilitator. She's a counseling psychologist and an assistant professor at Northern Caribbean University, Dr. Venese Madden. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, for us to set the context, what is restorative justice?
All right. So restorative justice is a process where parties who are having conflict or differences, they come together to resolve that issue, to make a decision on how they would move forward. That's putting it in a nutshell. But what happens really is that if, say, for example, two persons are having conflict and harm is committed or harm is experienced by one party and they don't necessarily want to go through the court system,
Okay.
then, they can ask the restorative justice facilitator to engage them in what we call a conference.
Okay.
And the conference is where persons would come together. So both parties would be present. They would have maybe persons who are family members to come and support, or someone from the community, or someone who would have observed what happened and can come and speak on
the issue.
either the offender or the victim's perspective. And then they work through. And the good thing about RJ is that both parties get the opportunity to share. So the offender share, the person who is offended get to talk, and given opportunity to ask the person who committed the harm, questions. And the person who committed the harm gets the opportunity to talk also. And not just that, but they are asked to take responsibility for whatever it is that they did. Yeah, the action.
You're actually answering some of what we're going to be talking about, but how different is this though from mediation?
Well, mediation is different. Well, for restorative justice, as it says, it's a circle. You have different persons who come to represent the different parties.
Okay.
So usually with mediation, you don't necessarily have these different parties, and they don't necessarily have a circle.
Okay.
And it's the structure of the RJ or restorative justice is somewhat different
from mediation. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So now that we've set the context, one of the things you mentioned just now is the whole idea of a conference.
Right.
So now we're getting into the different techniques that can be used for healthy relationships. So tell us a little bit more about the whole idea of that conference.
Okay. For the conference, for restorative justice, they have the conference and they have different types of circles.
Okay.
The conference is usually used for when there are serious offenses or some serious harm was committed. And you'll find that, for example, the court might, instead of sending someone to prison or jail time, they'll be asked to go and do the conference or go and do restorative justice. And this is where they would have them within the conference. And it's a circle, as I said, with the different parties sitting and facing each other. And then you have the facilitator and a co-facilitator. And, it is so structured that each person gets the opportunity to share and provide feedback. And as we share, I will share some of the questions that are asked, in that conference.
You said serious. Give me an example of what would be classified as something that's a serious offense.
Okay. If you have, say, a teenager who run afoul of the law, so maybe a robbery or some other crime, or even sometimes on the street or in school you have stabbings, and those are serious offenses, right? So the court, instead of sending the juvenile or the student to prison or to jail, it could be too that the offending party might say, they don't necessarily want the person to be locked up.
Okay.
And so
okay.
they would send them for the RJ in that situation.
Okay.
Restorative justice.
Okay. Okay. All right. So you mentioned the whole idea of the conference or the circle. How applicable, or how do you think this can be applied to just regular relationships?
Okay. I think it can be because of the nature. For example, this circle, especially where harm is done. Say in a relationship, man and woman relationship, there might be cheating or there might be a fight and one person is hurt. And, instead of deciding that, okay, we're going to call it quits and we go our opposite way, or I'm going to take you to court, they might decide that they want RJ because they may be aware of it, or say, you who are a little familiar might suggest it to them.
Okay.
And they decide that, okay, let's try RJ. Now, the nature of it is that it gives both parties the opportunity to talk, as I said. So each person will get an opportunity to feel heard. When people are angry and hurting and we are quarreling and back and forth we're not hearing each other. But the circle allows you to speak and listen while the other person is speaking. And when you have a really attuned facilitator, RJ facilitator, they will carry the process so that the person can really explain themselves. So the person may say something and the facilitator may ask them to explain a little further or clearer, or may ask the offending party or whichever party, do you understand what she's saying, or did you hear what she said? Did you agree with this? So it's a process that allows persons to feel heard.
Okay.
The other thing too, because of the questions that are asked, I don't know if you want me to go there yet, or you?
No, not just yet. You. Well, if it's specifically in regards to the conference or the circle technique, or
it goes for both.
All right, go ahead then. Right. Go ahead with it.
All right. So, and this is why it would be helpful for relationship because of the nature of the questions. So, there are two sets of questions. One set is for the victim. Okay. And maybe at this point we'd call them the survivor. And the other set would be for the perpetrator, the person who carried out the act or the harm.
Okay.
All right. So let me go with the first set of questions. And this would be for the person who carried out the act.
Okay.
The first question one would be, what happened? You notice, sometimes when we're angry and somebody's there trying to resolve the situation, instead of saying what happened, we ask, why did you do that? If I ask you, if you did something and I ask you, why did you do that? Right away, I'm putting you on the defensive, right?
Yeah.
And you start to feel judged already. But with those questions, it starts with what? What happened? Gives the person the opportunity to express themselves and to say exactly what happened. All right. And then the other one is, what were you thinking of at the time? So at the time when you carried out the act or when the act occurred, what were you thinking? Yeah. And then it gives the person a little opportunity to reflect. Maybe the person might have thought, I think that she maybe was dissing me and that's why I did what I did. So again, it gives you the opportunity to reflect and to explain yourself. And while this is happening, the person who got hurt is listening and maybe even getting a little clearer picture.
Yeah, another perspective.
Right. Then the other question is, what have you thought about since? So since the incident, have you thought about it and what have you thought about it? And this will also give them the opportunity to say whether or not they had some regrets or had they looked at the situation differently since. Right. And then the other one, who has been affected by what you have done and in what way? Again, taking risk, thinking about it, there are different, it's not just the person who got hurt, but other persons might have been
impacted.
Good. And then the other one is, what do you think you need to do to make things right? So the person now starts to say, how can I restore? And sometimes we can't totally restore, but at least to put things in place to say, I am sorry for what I did, and this is what will happen. Okay? So that's the first set of questions.
Okay.
And that is process, and then, the roles shift to the person who was hurt. And then the questions are, what did you think when you realized what had happened? I couldn't believe that she did this to me, or that kind of a thing. what impact has this incident had on you and others? So now the person who carried out the act is getting an opportunity to hear how whatever he or she did to the person, how it impacted
Did
them.
them.
And so it might be, I was disappointed, or I was hurt, I was traumatized, I was angry, I felt put down, depending on what happened. Gives the perpetrator an opportunity to say, this is how what you did impacted the
me.
individual, and not just me, but maybe my family or my friends, depending on what happened. Okay. And you can stop me when you're ready.
No, man, go ahead, go ahead.
So the other question now, what has been the hardest thing for you? And it gives another opportunity for the person to express based on what happened, because, I might have looked on the situation and said, boy, it must have been hard for her when she heard him call whatever the name. Just say it's a name calling, which is usually more serious than that. And I might think, as an observer, that would have been the hardest. But when I hear it from the person themselves, they might say, the hardest part was to know that this is my friend, and my friend did this to me. You understand? Good. And then, what do you think needs to happen to make things right? And the person may say, well, I might want an apology. If something was broken, the person need to replace it, or I might need some funds to cover my doctor's bill, depending on what happened. Those are some of the questions. And I know that they have added 2 others, I think, to the first one. It how can we make sure that this doesn't happen again? And this is where the community and whoever else is in the circle that is represented can start to help the person to recognize, hey, this is not about being punitive, it's about restorative. And so what can we do to ensure that this doesn't happen again? And the person get the opportunity to think, to say, what can happen? And another question is, how can we help? How can I, as a community member, how can I, as a parent, how can I, as a teacher, a friend, what can I do? So the person will recognize that we are here to help you. We are not here to punish you, but to help you. Having taken the responsibility, these are some of the things that would want to see happen.
Is this the major technique, so to speak, that is utilized, which is the conference/circle?
Yes, major techniques and the questions. And they usually have and as I said, because there are different questions, some are circles, some are a little more structured than others, depending on what the situation is. But for the conference and the more structured circle, they have what we call a talk piece. And the talk piece can be anything. It can be a ball, it can be something that represents whatever is happening. And at the beginning, the facilitator would explain what the talk piece is and how it works. So you don't talk unless you have the talk piece in your hand, and it goes around like that. Yeah, so those are the major techniques.
I am sure you're going to want to hear the conclusion of this conversation. And to do that, you have to join us again next time to hear what else Dr. Madden will be sharing. This is Noreen Daly. Until next time, where it's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, but with other people. Making It Last podcast.
Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives.